Listen to me carefully. There are moments in your life when heaven leans in close, when eternity whispers your name, and everything in your spirit begins to shift without explanation. You can't explain it to friends. You can't put it into words. All you know is that something invisible has begun to move on your behalf. You feel restless, but not lost. Disconnected, yet not abandoned. That's not confusion, it's divine transition. When you see this sign, it means heaven is ready to release what you've been praying for. The wait is over, and destiny is calling your name. You see, one of the greatest lessons of faith is learning that detachment is not rejection, it's preparation. When God starts pulling certain people away, when doors begin to close, when your spirit starts losing appetite for certain things you once craved, it's not because you've lost direction. It's because God is setting you apart for something your surroundings cannot handle. You cannot enter the next dimension of your calling while holding on to the weights of the past. Detachment is heaven's way of saying, I am clearing the path for your miracle. Many of you have been asking, why do I feel distant from everyone? Why do I feel misunderstood? Why does it seem like nothing excites me anymore? It's because you're outgrowing what was never meant to last forever. When a seed begins to germinate, it breaks away from its shell. It doesn't hate the shell, it simply recognizes it can't stay confined in what once protected it. So when God separates you from certain environments, it's not to leave you empty. It's to bring you into a space of expansion. Every miracle requires room to manifest. And until you let go of what was, you'll never receive what is. The reason some of you have waited so long is not because heaven forgot your name. It's because heaven was preparing your character. God never promotes what hasn't been proven. Waiting seasons are testing grounds. They reveal whether you're attached to outcomes or anchored in obedience. When you detach emotionally from what you thought you needed, you release the weight of disappointment and position your heart to receive with clarity. Miracles are not attracted to anxiety. They are drawn to surrender. Peace is the soil where divine power grows. And hear me, when your spirit aligns with heaven's timing, the delay ends instantly. There is a moment when preparation meets purpose, and heaven says now. The moment you stop wrestling and start resting, things begin to accelerate. That's why the waiting season feels heavy right before breakthrough. It's the weight of manifestation pressing through the unseen. October 20th is not just a date, it is a prophetic signal. It represents divine synchronization. Heaven has been orchestrating every detail in silence. And the silence was never absence. It was incubation. When you learn to let go, heaven can trust you with more. Detachment is not a loss of passion. It's a mastery of purpose. It's the evidence that you have matured beyond needing validation to feel valuable. It's the moment your soul says, if God is for me, that's enough. And the very instant you reach that posture of peace, miracles begin to locate you. They don't come because you chased them. They come because you became ready for them. The wait was never punishment. It was preparation for stewardship. So if you've been feeling that divine pull, if your heart feels distant from old circles, if your spirit is restless but full of quiet faith, rejoice. It's a sign that heaven is about to open doors no man can close. The wait is over. The signal has been sent. 7 miracles are being assigned to your name, and they will find you not because of where you are, but because of who you've become. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood seasons in the life of a believer. When God begins to detach you from certain people, places, or possessions, it rarely feels divine. It feels like loss. It feels like abandonment. It feels as though you've been stripped of stability. But what you must understand is that divine detachment is not punishment, it's preparation. Heaven never removes something from your life unless it's preparing you for something greater. The problem is that we often confuse the pruning with rejection. We think when something is taken, God is angry. We think when relationships shift, God is silent. But in reality, He's not punishing you, He's positioning you. Every great calling demands separation before elevation. When God intends to move you into a higher dimension of purpose, He begins by disrupting your attachments to what cannot go with you. That's why some of the most painful goodbyes are actually the most necessary. It's not that the people or situations were evil. It's that their time in your story has expired. What once nourished you now limits you. And the same God who blessed you with that environment is the same God who now says it's time to move. To resist the detachment is to resist the preparation. You cannot enter the next season with the same level of emotional dependency that carried you through the last one. You see, when God calls you to something new, He will first test your ability to let go. He will allow certain things to fall apart, not because He wants to hurt you, but because He wants to show you how much of your identity was built on what could be shaken. Many people never experience the fullness of their destiny because they cling to what God has already released. They confuse comfort with calling. But destiny does not grow in comfort zones. It grows in divine disruptions. Detachment is the hand of God removing everything that competes for His attention in your heart. It's His way of saying, you've depended on that long enough. Now depend on me. When Abraham was told to leave his father's house, it wasn't just a geographical move. It was a spiritual detachment. God was teaching him that purpose requires distance from the familiar. You can't hold on to the old and expect to enter the new. Every level of growth will demand a separation from something you once thought you couldn't live without. God detaches you to redefine you. He takes you out of environments that define you by your past so He can introduce you to your true identity in His promise. That's why detachment feels like isolation. It's not that you're alone. It's that you're being hidden for refinement. There's a difference between rejection and redirection. Rejection says you're unwanted. Redirection says you're being prepared. The pain of losing what you love is often the doorway to discovering who you are. When Joseph was thrown into the pit by his brothers, it looked like rejection, but it was actually divine transportation. God used betrayal as a vehicle to move him into position for destiny. Had Joseph stayed attached to his father's house, he would have never reached Pharaoh's palace. The pit wasn't punishment, it was preparation. And the same is true for you. Every detachment you've endured was heaven's way of transferring you from comfort to calling. Many believers misunderstand the silence of detachment. They think when God is removing people, He has left them. But silence is not absence, it's strategy. God speaks through silence when words would be too small to explain what He's doing. When you feel detached, He's teaching you to hear beyond noise, to discern beyond emotion. Detachment is a training ground for spiritual sensitivity. It develops your ability to trust without proof, to believe without validation, to walk without sight. That's how God strengthens your faith, by separating you from everything that props you up so that only His presence sustains you. Have you noticed how a child learns to walk? The parent holds the hand at first, guiding every step, but eventually the hand is withdrawn. Not to abandon the child, but to strengthen their balance. Detachment operates in the same way. God withdraws certain supports so that your or spiritual muscles can grow. He wants you to learn stability in His Word, not dependency on human reassurance. He wants you to stand firm in faith, not stumble every time approval is absent. So He detaches you from what kept you comfortable, because comfort never creates maturity. Detachment also exposes idols. Sometimes the thing you call a blessing has become a barrier between you and God. You may not even realize how emotionally tied you are to certain people or achievements until He asks you to release them. That's why He shakes things. He removes false anchors. Anything that replaces trust in Him will eventually become a source of pain. When God begins to detach you, it's an act of mercy. He's saving you from spiritual suffocation. He's saying, if you stay tied to that, you'll drown in a place I never called you to live. Detachment is divine CPR. God breathing new life into a soul that's been clinging to the wrong source of air. Sometimes He detaches you by disappointment. He allows something to fail not because it was bad, but because its success would have distracted you. He allows the door to close because that open door would have led you away from His will. He lets the friendship fade because the conversation was no longer feeding your faith. Every disappointment carries the fingerprint of a divine appointment. You may cry over what's gone, but heaven rejoices because now you're light enough to ascend. You cannot rise if you're tied to what's sinking. Detachment is also the process of purifying your desires. As long as your motives are mixed, miracles will delay. God removes what feeds your flesh to strengthen what fuels your faith. You begin to see that you don't need recognition. You need revelation. You don't need more followers. You need more fruit. You don't need everyone to understand you. You need heaven to approve you. When your desires are purified, you begin to attract divine acceleration. That's why detachment always comes before elevation. It purifies the vessel for greater oil. You will notice that after every divine detachment, clarity follows. When the noise leaves, direction becomes clearer. When you no longer seek validation from others, you begin to hear God's voice more distinctly. Detachment creates stillness, and stillness is where revelation grows. It's only when the storm of dependency quiets that you realize peace was never around you. It was always within you. God removes the external so you can rediscover the internal. He silences the familiar so you can hear the eternal. Understand this, God never detaches you without giving you something deeper. You may lose the crowd, but you'll gain communion. You may lose the platform, but you'll gain power. You may lose a relationship, but you'll gain revelation. What you lose in quantity, you gain in quality. Detachment is heaven's exchange rate. It trades what is temporary for what is eternal. You will never know the fullness of divine purpose until you are willing to walk away from what no longer carries God's presence. The beauty of detachment is that it doesn't just separate, it sanctifies. It prepares you to carry more of God's weight without breaking. It strips away everything that cannot sustain divine pressure. Many people ask God for greater influence, but they resist the pruning that prepares the vessel. You cannot hold glory with unsteady hands. So God detaches you, not because you are weak, but because He is strengthening your grip. He is enlarging your capacity by emptying your heart of unnecessary attachments. This is the mystery of divine preparation. Heaven subtracts before it multiplies. It empties before it fills. It hides before it reveals. And every subtraction is strategic. Detachment is God's way of teaching you that your destiny is not dependent on who stays. It's sustained by who sent you. When you finally understand that, you stop chasing what left and start preparing for what's coming. Because every time God detaches you, it means something new is being designed with your name on it.